If you've spent more than 2 minutes on the internet, you've come across trolls. Now, you may label them as haters or negative people, whatever you call them, they're out there. And in this week's Studio Live Today podcast, we're going to be talking about why are trolls, what are trolls, and how can you respond. All of that and more on this week's Studio Live Today podcast. Hello, my name is Pete Johns. This is the Studio Live Today podcast. You can find out all the ways you can interact with me and the whole community over at studiolivetoday.com, because our goal around here is to help you create, record, and release your best music. But there's challenges to doing that, and a lot of those challenges are not even about you. They're not about you and your music creation and your sharing of your music or your recording of your music. They're about what other people may think. Now, if you're a creative type, there's a fairly high likelihood that you are also maybe a little bit sensitive, and that's not a bad thing. A lot of us, if you're a creative type, you're an overthinker, and sometimes you might actually be sensitive, in which case you probably respond to what other people have to say, and maybe, just maybe, you're listening a little bit too much. Now, if you're listening to the right people giving you the right advice, that can be really good for you and your music. If you're listening to the wrong people giving you the wrong advice, that can be very, very bad. And that's why I wanted to talk about this topic, not to just spend time hating on trolls, because that's really easy. That's like low-hanging fruit. But to actually talk about a little bit more about the psychology and the background of why people react in the way that they do. Are these people just really negative people that want to bring you down, or is there something else at play here? So we're first going to dive into the why. We're then going to dive into what some strategies and techniques are for you to respond. Do you have to? The old adage is feed the trolls. Should you feed the trolls? Short answer is no, but why not? And what should you do instead? That's what we'll be talking about in this week's show. If you are watching the show, the live premiere, or on the replay, please leave your comments either as live chat if you're watching the live version, or down in the comments section below. If you're listening on the audio-only version, we love you just as much. Feel free to leave a review and a rating on your podcast player of choice. So, what is a troll? Let's give a quick definition here. So when we're talking about trolls, we are talking about people who are unnecessarily negative without necessarily having a reason why or a really good basis for their feedback. So I wanted to make that really clear up front, because a lot of people say, Johns, you're always talking about trolls and haters. What's wrong with giving some constructive feedback, or what a lot of people like to call constructive criticism? I don't use criticism because critical, very easy to be overly critical. And criticism, like feedback, is just a nicer word for criticism. And criticism also denotes that you're only going to pick out the bad points and you're not going to actually give any feedback about what worked well. Because remember, when you're giving feedback about people's music, it is just as important, if not more important, that you give the positives as well as the negatives. Us creators are sensitive types. A lot of us are overthinkers, and a lot of us need that positive reinforcement. That's not a bad thing. It's not like the American Idol syndrome where you just only have to say good things, but providing feedback is a very challenging thing to do. It's why in the corporate world, I came from the corporate world. As a leader in corporate jobs, if you're a team leader or if you're a manager, a lot of people don't get it right because they think that they just need to give the feedback and they just need to tell people what they're doing wrong. They don't realize that when people are receiving feedback, when you're giving feedback, there's an art to it. And it's not the old turd sandwich. It's not the say something nice, then throw the negative in the middle and then say something nice at the end. That's old school. That's like 80s and 90s feedback. It doesn't really work because eventually you end up just making up stuff. So you're like, your hair looks very straight today. Your job performance is terrible and we're about to fire you. Red shoes, good choice. Like, no, it's ridiculous. You need to just be straight and honest with people if there is something to do that. But the difference between someone giving you feedback or criticism, if you want to call it that, and a troll, is that a troll is actually trying to make you feel a certain way. They're trying to have a reaction. They're trying to gauge a reaction. So the relationship between a troll and a bully is very close. So if you've ever been bullied, hands up who's been bullied. Yes, again, if you're the type of folks that are in these sort of communities, you probably have. You probably weren't the bully, but you may well have been bullied. If you haven't, more power to you, and you're luckier than I and some of the other folks that I'm sure are watching and listening to this one. So you're talking in terms of a troll, you're talking about someone who is trying to garner a reaction. And the whole adage of don't feed the trolls comes from the fact that it's like a bully. If you just ignore them, they'll go away. Now, not always the greatest advice in the world. I let too many bullies walk all over me in the past, and I should have actually done something about it. And again, we'll talk about that in part two of the things that you can do about it. So, why are these people? So, what are they doing? Well, they're giving negative comments. Let's give a few examples of that before we jump into the why. So you may post your song. Let's say you're on a forum. Let's say it's a book with faces on it, and you post a link to your song, and folks will go in there and they'll check out your song and they'll start providing feedback. And some people go, "Yay, rockin' tune," and someone will go, "Oh, really dig this. I'd probably just turn the guitar down a bit in the second verse." All of that is cool. All of that is cool, constructive feedback. And then someone will go, "Bruh, this sucks." What? Like how is that helpful for starters? And why would you do that? Why are you just making someone feel bad? Why do you want to actually just make a comment that is going to have the sole purpose of making someone feel bad? And instead of building them up and giving them some advice that might actually help them, you're pushing them down. And that's the difference. When people say, "Yo, man, I just tell it like it is, I call a spade a frickin' spade." That's lovely, but that's not helpful because you're not helping people. People aren't going to listen to you if you are that. And you can feel that way, but guess what? Despite what you might see on TV and from some certain people these days, just saying what you think all the time is not how society works, and it's not how people's psyche can actually absorb and improve upon things. And the old saying about the being the best of something, there's two ways to do that. You are really, really good, or you spend all of your time pushing other people down. And again, you can see which side of that trolls are on. They want to be at the top by pushing other people down, because the more people that they can make feel bad and the more people they can make stop doing a thing like creating music, that's a win. So don't feed the trolls, but also don't let the trolls win, because I've had story after story. I've had people come to me and say, I didn't create music for the longest time because this one person said this one thing and I thought I was worthless. I thought my music was bad and I stopped creating. That to me is the worst. So in terms of things that can be bad in the creative world, that is about the worst, because that's robbing the world of your creativity and your music. Your music should be out there in the world, and no one is going to get better. Everyone starts at zero. This is the stupid thing about trolling. Everyone starts at zero. So even if someone's song is absolutely horrendous and has almost zero redeeming qualities, if it's their first song, you know what you say? You know what a normal, nice person that actually wants to build that person up says? You're off to a good start, or not even a good start, but good courage shown there by putting that out there to the world. You don't have to actually be a dick about it. You don't have to bring someone down. I've even said to people, it's really great that you're starting to create music. Keep working at it. That's the same as, this wasn't particularly great, but which one is going to make them continue? And again, if you say, well, what if they're so bad they shouldn't continue? It's music, people. It doesn't matter. You don't have to listen to it. Scroll past. Yeah, this is another thing. Maybe we'll touch on that a bit more, that more people need to learn how to scroll past. So that's a little bit of the what and how trolling actually works, or my definition of trolling. But you may have other comments or other feedback or other thoughts on your definition of what and how and who and why a troll is. So please leave comments if you're watching the video version, or feel free to email me. I'm always available for a chat, pete@studiolivetoday.com. Why are trolls? That's what we wanted to get to here, and we're going to talk about a few of the reasons that I think. And again, your mileage may vary. You may have your own views and your own thoughts, but based on my experience and based on the things that I've researched and looked into, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a trained professional, and I always start these sort of things before we dive into some of the kind of psychoanalysis stuff by saying, please, if you're struggling with this sort of stuff, if you're being bullied, if you've got people that are genuinely acting in a threatening way, please seek professional help. I am not a professional. This community is not a professional or professionals. There are professionals out there. Depending where you are in the world, there'll be different organizations and different people that can actually help you. So please look for ways that you can interact with people if you are struggling. But that being said, here's my views and thoughts. So why? Let's start with the nurture. My wife has something that she loves to say, not to the children because she's nicer than that, but whenever we've had problems with people that have been what we call schnitzels, which is a nice way, that child's such a little schnitzel. It's just a nice word that you know what it means. You know what we're saying. So when there are schnitzels that are acting like schnitzels towards our children, what my wife likes to say is, she said she fantasizes if she was a different person of just stopping the kid and saying, "Hey, can you go home and tell your parents that they've raised a really horrible child?" And I kind of love that. It's a little dark, but I kind of love that. And please, let's reiterate that she hasn't done this and won't do this, but it's a nice little fact because you know it comes from that, right? You've seen it. You've seen generations of people where I act like this because my daddy act like this and his daddy act like this, and we all did okay. It's like the old adage of like, I walked 17 miles to school in the pouring rain every day and I turned out fine. And then you're like, yeah, no, I don't think it's actually the case because you've raised this child who also thinks the way that you do and treats people the way that you do. So maybe that's not so much. So there is definitely a nurture situation, especially if that person, again, without getting too dark, has had someone who has been abusive towards them. I mean, especially verbally. There's other sorts of abuse that we won't touch on here, but verbal abuse and being put down and being told you're not good enough and being told you can't do things. When someone has that happen to them enough, they think that's how you react in the world. They think that that's okay because they've never been pulled up on it. And sure, they might go to school or they might go to work, and people will then tell them that it's not okay to do that. But it's really hard to fight against that nurture, the way that you've been brought up to do things. It feels like natural. And to a lot of people, the reason that they bully. The old saying is hurt people, hurt people. I'll say that again because it's one of my favorite sayings, not because it's cool or anything, but it just explains so much. Hurt people, hurt people. So if you've had the sort of upbringing where you've been nurtured in a way in an environment where there's been lots of hate, there's been lots of shouting and yelling, there's been lots of aggression, there's been lots of being put down, there's been lots of criticism, harsh, unnecessary criticism without specifics, then hey, you're going to go out into the world and do the same thing because it's just how you've been brought up. Not an excuse, but it's definitely a part of the why. What about nature? So if you talk nurture, you've got to talk nature, right? Are some people just dicks? Well, kind of. There are definitely tendencies. There are psychopathic tendencies, sociopathic tendencies, narcissistic tendencies. Again, not a psychologist, but I read a lot about this sort of thing, and I like to analyze people and their traits and why they're a certain way. So there are definitely people that are suffering this sort of thing, and it is to do with narcissism. And look, they're closely related to what we're going to talk about next, which is self-esteem and confidence. But there are a lot of people who simply don't have that natural feeling of remorse or the natural feeling of sympathy or empathy towards other people. The way I like to describe it is they're the main character in their own movie, and no one else matters. Like the Metallica song, and no one else mattered. No, that was a different song, but that's the way a lot of people can actually think. And you're probably thinking about some people either in your life or maybe in the news media of late that you can think of that are narcissists, sociopaths, or borderline psychopaths. And there's mild differences between those, but they all share the same common trait, which is the inability to have empathy for other people in other situations, and just an 100% focus in on them, their well-being, and their benefits. So yeah, that is definitely part of the why are trolls. Many trolls are just giant narcissists that have never been correctly diagnosed and therefore have not received the support that they need to curb those. And look, yes, there are examples of folks who are neurodiverse as well. I don't think that's as much of a thing. Like, yes, there are some people who aren't able to sort of filter some of the things that they say at times, but not that I put them in a different bucket, but there is a difference, I think, in my opinion. I'm not gonna get into giant debates about it, but yeah, I think that there is a difference. But it does come down. There's a lot that comes down to the nature of people and what they are naturally prone to do. Next up, self-confidence, self-esteem. This is where a lot of this comes from. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say that in the music world, at least half, probably closer to three quarters or three fourths for my American friends, of people that are trolls are because they bring other people down to build themselves up. So instead of them trying to feel better about themselves by doing good things, they've gone through the old saying, like there's no such thing as bad attention, like, getting attention anyway. Hey, it's still attention. So even if you get attention for the wrong reasons, a lot of people who haven't had a lot of attention, and look, it's related to the nature and the nurture that we talked about, but a lot of people that haven't had the attention that they think they need or deserve will go out of their way to bring other people down, knowing that they're going to get a reaction, which is why the old "don't feed the trolls" thing is as true today as it was in the 90s internet and the 80s BBSs, when I first sort of heard the term troll and saw people trolling in chat rooms and FidoNet and news groups. Did any of those things mean anything to anyone? Yeah, if you're over 40, they do. Or even in your 30s and you're a whiz kid on the computers. So a lot of it is to do with self-esteem and confidence. So it is, hey, if I am struggling with this thing, rather than me admit that my level of confidence and my level of self-esteem is low and try and build that up by having positive conversations with people and engaging with people in a positive way, what I will do to feel better about myself is push other people down, is bring other people down. And the easiest way to do that is to say negative things, to say bad things about other people. And in our case, other people's music. So that's another thing, that self-esteem, the confidence thing, pushing down on other people to make them feel better is something that we see a lot, especially in the music world. And again, I'll talk about the folks that have come to me and said, a lot of people in their 40s and 50s and 60s, they might have had that one music teacher that was feeling a little, and look, there's a couple of things you can say here. Either they're just being a dick, or perhaps they're even feeling threatened. And they think that the more people that are creating music and that are creating music that could be competing with them, the worse off it is for them. So they actually want to push down the competition. They want to make sure that those people aren't creating music. So I've had people in their 50s, 60s that have said, I stopped creating music because when I was 16, I had this one music teacher who said, oh, this song's terrible, you're never going to be good. And they stopped. And to me, that's horrible. That's something I want to avoid. And the reason that, that we have the whole reason I started this channel, and that my mantra has always been to help people create, record, and release their best music. Very important words there. Is that it really doesn't matter. Music's a bit like golf. Unless you want to become one of the top golfers in the world, you're really competing with yourself. And it's the same with music. Unless you want to become a number one record-selling pop artist, and then it doesn't really matter, because you're only competing against yourself and competing with the music that you've created in the past. And again, because as I said before, everyone starts at zero, you're going to get better. Very few people have started creating music, written their first song, worked at it, create, record, release, get 2, 3, 4, 5 years in, and they're creating worse music. It just doesn't happen. It would be like playing off a 50 handicap, playing golf for 5 years, and then you're playing off a 70. No, you're going to bring that down. You're going to improve. You're going to practice. Practice makes progress. The final why of trolls that I want to talk about here is an interesting one that dawned on me a few years back, and it's a concept called sunk cost bias. And it's kind of related both to the gear, so the amount of money that someone spent on their setup. So we see this a lot more in, you shouldn't use GarageBand on your iPad because unless you're using, a Mac Pro with Pro Tools and hundreds and thousands of dollars worth of gear, you're not good enough. Why? Because that person's invested all that money and all that effort. So therefore they think that's the only way to go. Same kind of thing with people trolling related to music creation, which is that I've got, and I always say that anytime you see a comment that starts with, I've got X years experience in Y, you can basically just disregard anything, which is weird, because you would think that would be the sort of feedback you should listen to. Someone that's got 23 years in a recording studio, surely they've got better feedback for me than, some other bloke that's recording on, or some other lady recording on GarageBand. But no, it's not the case, because they've got a different bias. They've sunk all of their time and energy into doing things a certain way, and they probably haven't spent much of that time learning and growing. This is the thing. A lot of folks that we label trolls, they're not actually developing because they're spending so much of their time. I often say, if you're that good, you're just spending all your time creating and recording and releasing and helping people make music. how do you have time to be in forums and groups and providing this feedback, often unsolicited? If you're that good, get out there and prove it. The proof should be in the music. It shouldn't be in what you've got to say about it. So, yeah, the sunk cost bias or the sunk time, energy, effort bias is a hard one. I bet if there's someone that spent their 50-year career in the newspaper biz, they probably didn't want to learn about the internet. They probably wanted to just keep writing their articles for the newspaper. It's the same in radio. If you're a radio DJ, you don't want to learn about podcasting because you know radio back to front. You've had 37 years experience as the golden voice of radio. Guess what? Radio is dying. Your medium is dying. Yeah, well, no, radio's still around, but it's not what it was. And it's the same sort of thing. If you've worked in $1 million analog studio with a giant console and a whole bunch of outboard gear, does that make you better at giving someone feedback when they're using plugins on their MacBook and creating in Logic? Probably not. I mean, the fundamentals are there. If someone's overcompressed something, then you probably know that. But as simple as something like someone will say, "Oh no, your levels, you're recording at too low." I've had this before. I've had people say, "Oh, you tell people to record at too low levels." I've worked in studios for decades. You got to push those levels up. You got to be hitting close to the top of the meters. And I'll say, "Yeah." In an analog environment, in a digital environment, you don't have the same problems with noise floor and tape hiss. You're not actually fighting this. In fact, you're doing yourself a disservice if you turn the volume up too much because you're going to be clipping. In the analog world, a little analog clip at the top of your levels, that's fine. In the digital world, sounds like garbage. So, yeah, sometimes the advice, the expertise that you get, and you've seen it. You just go onto a forum, go to any forum right now, and you'll see someone, and you'll see that almost every answer they give has to start with their qualifications. And it's weird because I've watched a lot of masterclasses from a lot of great creators, from Hans Zimmer, amazing composer and film scorer, from Tom Morello, guitarist for Rage Against the Machine. Do they start by telling you, I'm Tom Morello, I've been studying guitar for 37 years and I've had 4 platinum? No, they're like, hey, I'm Tom, I like rocking out. If you like rocking out, here's how you do it. Hans Zimmer in his masterclass says, I 100% expect that the next wave of amazing film composers are kids sitting on their MacBooks and iPads right now, playing around with GarageBand and Logic. Because they just are. It's just the way it's going to go. So, yes, it's great. You can have your rose-colored glasses and look backwards, but things are going to change. The only thing that stays the same is that things will change. So, they're the whys. That's a lot of the stuff going through a lot of people's heads there. They have a lack of confidence, so they need to bring other people down. They've been brought up in such a way so they've seen this behavior and they've just learned behavior. They have what we would used to say a screw loose, but they have a mental condition. They have a psychological condition such as narcissism, sociopathy, or they just have spent so much time doing something a certain way that anytime anyone does anything a different way, they feel they have to. It's their duty. It's their moral obligation to show them the light. But again, if they were a professional and they were really as good as they say they are, ain't got no time for this. They ain't got no time to be a troll. So put that filter across all of the comments that you get, and you'll suddenly realize that 98% of the criticism that you see about people's music online is pretty much unjustified. Plus, you can often tell a troll because they don't actually give specifics. So the difference again between real feedback, which I like and think is necessary, and trolling feedback is that trolls are often very vague. Oh, your mix sounds like crap. Okay. What about it's bad? The whole thing. Okay. Whereas if someone says, I think that perhaps you need to add a bit more limiting to that mix because it seems a bit thin. Your bottom end's a little bit light on, so I would either cut some of the top end or maybe add some bottom end in your EQ. That's beautiful. Like if I get that feedback, I'm like, cool. Doesn't mean I would agree with it. I might say, actually, no, I was going for more of an airy feel. So I understand and appreciate you that you'd prefer some more low end. I actually like it the way it is. That's cool too. So you can have a back and forth with this sort of thing. So that is feedback and that is opinion. Didn't really touch on opinion, did we? But the other thing about trolls is so much of it is subjective anyway. Look at your Mac versus PC. Look at your iOS versus Android or BlackBerry Do people still use Blackberries? No, they don't. Pretty funny. It used to be like, yeah, Blackberry versus, I used to use a Palm, a Palm Trio, the old handsprings. Anyway, that's for another day. So that's all great, Johns, but what do we do about it? How do we fix the situation? There is no fix. I know. See you, folks. Have a great week. No, there is no easy fix to this sort of thing because unfortunately, trolling has been and will continue to be a problem that we all have in the world, not only on the internet but in real life and all over the place. Because people have all all the whys we just talked about aren't going to go away. People aren't simply going to start raising their children better with more respect. No, some of the natural personality traits aren't going to go away. No, people's self-esteem and confidence issues aren't going to instantly be resolved and they're going to suddenly be a really positive person that's going to help others. No. So what do we do about it? How do we fix it? Well, there's a few things. Ignore them. Ignore them. Ignore the bully and they'll go away. Well, that's actually an option. And the reason I'm leading off with it is it's probably the best option. And why is it the best option? Because you don't need this. You don't need that sort of thing. And the vast majority of the time when people are listening to trolls, it's almost like, not that you want to be the victim or anything like that, but a lot of times people think they can't get away from things. And look, the difference is, if we're talking online here, if it's your partner, if it's your parent, if it's your child, sure, that's going to be a bit harder. If it's your best friend that you see every day, it's a little bit harder. And we're not really even talking about that. But the online world, here's the great thing. You get to curate. You get to choose where you go. You get to choose who you block and you ban and you unfollow and you unfriend. I've had some tough choices to make in recent times about some people that I've realized if every time you see a comment from someone, you just, you know that thing where you're like, oh, I know exactly what this is going to be. I know it's going to be negative and I know it's going to add zero value to the world. Guess what? Don't read it. I know I say this about the news too. I say, oh, if you don't like the news, just don't watch the news. And then people will say, well, Johns, you've got to, keep it. If everyone had that opinion, then everything would be bad. So yeah, I get it. But for your own self-preservation and your own mental health, especially when it's around a hobby or something you do for fun, don't expose yourself to these people. So there's a certain website that shall remain unnamed that I simply don't go to because the people there are, 40% great and 60% horrible. I'm not going to troll through, pun intended, all of that to find the 40% of people that are cool. I'll just go somewhere else. So I get very, very biased. But a lot of the platforms, a lot of the communities that we have created, I don't say I with this one. I know the whole royal we is a bit weird because I am Studio Live today. But that we, meaning me and like-minded people who are positive about helping folks create, record and release music, have created are really good. Why? Because we very closely vet who is in those communities and we keep a very close eye on. So the Create, Record, Release Facebook group, which is my favorite place to hang out, everyone that's there is there for the same reason. People come and go, and people will come in there and they'll start going down the trolling path. And we've got a group of great moderators and admins, and we'll see it coming. We'll see it coming clear as mud, or clear as crystal. We'll see what they're doing, and we'll see things people are saying, and we'll be like, "Yep, they're going down this path." And lo and behold, you wait a couple of days. Usually, it doesn't take that long. And they've started jumping into conversations. And again, please don't hear what I'm not saying. It's not about saying that we need to censor, because people get very uppity about this. People talk about, but it's freedom of speech. I got a right to say what I want to say, and you can't censor me and don't silence me. This is my opinion. I'm entitled to it. Great. Freedom of speech does not mean freedom of consequence. So you can say whatever you want. You can come into my group and disobey the rules and tell everyone that they suck. I can also ban you and not let you back in. So again, it comes down to that of who you're actually letting be in your circle. And you'd be surprised at how few people you actually oblige to. Sure, family, yeah, close friends, but even them you can limit. You don't have to share things with particular people. So ignoring them, removing them, or removing yourself from a situation is it's the classic, and it's still probably the best way to do. How about replying with kindness? Ooh, that's a controversial one, isn't it? Now, I've done this on some occasions. To be honest, in 2023 version of John's, with everything going on in the world, I really don't have a lot of time to do this. So I don't do it very often. But sometimes very occasionally, if I get trolly type comments and I think that it's from someone that may, because again, we talked about all the whys. The other way is sometimes people are just having a really bad day. And I do this more where it's someone that perhaps I know a little bit or I've seen them act in a really positive way and then suddenly, boom, they've turned on a dime and they're acting really negatively. So sometimes responding or replying with kindness can actually work quite well, especially if you know someone, like I said, because I've often said if someone says, "Oh man, this is just terrible. Everything sucks and you suck," and I'll just say, "Is everything okay? This is quite uncommon for you to react this way. Is everything all right? Is there anything that you need help with?" And look, the good thing about this is that if it is just a bad day, and if someone did just start ranting and commenting without thinking, just going off because I got a bit of a hair trigger, then they're going to very quickly put their tail between their legs and go, "Oh, yeah, sorry, actually. Yeah, I just found out my dog has 6 months to live. So therefore, I was feeling really shitty. Therefore, I made a crappy comment to you. I'm sorry. I'll try not to do it again." Great. Yay, we've pushed through. But if the answer is, "Ev you suck. Yeah, don't tell me what to do," well, then you've just reinforced it and you know. So quite often when, especially in some of the groups that I'm a moderator for, we'll do that. Instead of reaching out and saying, "You've just, yeah, that's your second strike, one more strike and the ban hammer's coming down," grrr, we'll just say, "Hey, not sure if you realize the impact you're having here, but you've actually upset quite a few people that have reported some of the things you've been saying. Is that your intention? Because if not, then you might need to curb the way that you're presenting yourself." And guess what? If the person at that point says, "Screw you guys, you can't stop me," okay, you're out. See you later. But if they say, "Oh, actually, no, I didn't even realize that. Sorry, I didn't realize that that was the impact I was having." Well, guess what? You give them another chance. I'm all for more chances if someone actually shows remorse or shows some level of humanity or empathy. But if they're just like, "Meh, meh," then you're like, "See ya," out the door. What about replying with aggression? What if we meet them head on with the force? If someone comes at you, why don't you slap them back with a really mean comment right back at them? Well, look, you do you. But in my experience, so I've worked in a call center for an energy company. Now, and I actually worked in a complaints area. So I worked in sort of the resolution area where if the highest of the high level, the people that just got $1,000 electricity bill, for instance, were calling in. So these were some of the angriest people that you're ever going to want to deal with. And unlike the online world of music creation, I couldn't ban them from being a customer. I couldn't just block them and ignore them. I had to try and help them and resolve their issue. And when I was sort of talking with my team and people would say, "Oh, they're not allowed to talk to me like that. I give them 3 warnings and then I hang up on them." I'm like, "How is that resolving their issue?" "Oh, well, they can't treat me like that." I'm like, "No, they shouldn't treat you like that, but they're going to." And if you get uppity, here's the thing I always said that if someone's at an aggression level of here, for those listening on the audio, I've got my hand held up at like 80%. If someone's there and you match them, then they have to go up above. So they're at 85%, then you go to 90%, then they go to 98%, then you go to 100%. It's just escalating. It's why we call it escalating tempers. Whereas if they come in at the 80% there, and you come in down here at 30%, like assertive, but not aggressive. So that can actually work. So the whole matching aggression and matching violence with violence often backfires because it just pushes things. And if you know what? You do you. If you want to have a shouting match and a virtual screaming match with someone else online, then maybe go for it. But just, I don't think it's going to add a lot of value. And for me, for my goals of creating, recording, and releasing music, I don't really see how it helps. Having an argument with someone over which compressor is best to use and getting into a screaming fit because you both use different settings, it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. It really makes no difference to either of you or your music creation. So do try and put that into perspective and say, is it worth my time, energy, and mood? Because getting aggressive, you know, your muscles tense up, you lose your rational ability to actually have a conversation. You would have seen it when people get angry, sometimes they're actually physically shaking and their face goes red. And yeah, that means that they're in a state where they're not using logic, they're not making logical decisions that are going to be the best for them. So try to maybe avoid that one. But my advice again, your mileage may vary. Maybe it works for you. Maybe you're a dominant personality and you like dominating others. And we mentioned it right up front, but I'm going to reiterate it here. Seek help from others. So other people have probably been the reason I do these podcasts every now and then. Yes, we talk about the technical side, or talk about creating and compressors and EQ and volume and all those sorts of things. But the reason that we stop and take a breath and talk about things like trolls and feedback and dealing with conflict is that it is important. And it is something that everyone actually experiences at some stage in some way. So I want to say you are not alone. I say this to my kids. I say this to anyone who comes to me with any challenges. I may not be able to fix your problem. Always here to listen. Always try my best to listen to people if they've got challenges that they'd like to talk through. I may not be able to solve it, but I can at least say, yeah, I can validate it, and other people can as well. And look, you don't want to have the opposite of that. The extreme opposite is a giant plum party. And you've probably seen this as well. Sometimes you get communities of forums of people that we're all the downtrodden, and then they spend all their time talking about all the bullies they've had in their lives and all the challenges that they have and all the problems. I don't think that's actually going to help either. You don't want to get into that point where it's like, woe is me. By the way, plum party, poor little old me party. So everyone going into poor little old me. And you see this on the internet a lot. You see a lot of people that the opposite of someone that's like, I call a spade, I tell it like it is. There's people that are oversharing in a different way. So they're like, I put everything out there. I tell everyone everything. I share every experience that I have. And that's not actually as powerful as talking to a person, like one-on-one conversation. So a lot of people think that there's therapeutic outlet is putting everything happening to them on public social media. They're like, here, and you've seen them. Unfortunately, it's the other side of things. It's the attention thing where they're comment fishing or they're sympathy fishing. I know that might sound like harshness. That might sound like a couple of harsh comments there, but it actually doesn't help them. They think they does. They get the little dopamine hits of a lot of people liking or putting the little hug emoji or leaving a comment saying, I feel so bad for you. But it's not actually helping them as much as having a single one-on-one conversation with someone would. So just keep that in mind as well. But all that being said, seek help from others. Seek help from others directly, and maybe don't feel the need that you have to broadcast it, because that can actually have a alternate effect. And unfortunately, yeah, sometimes you get into that situation where if you're always putting negativity out there, not even in a aggressive manner, but then sometimes people become a little numb to that. If you're doing it to everyone all the time, whereas if you've got close confidants that you can talk to about this sort of thing, it can actually work better. Smaller groups are often better than large broadcasting. Otherwise, you're not communicating, you're broadcasting, pushing it out to the world, and that often doesn't help you. And again, all of this given from non-professional advice. So my advice comes back to seek professional advice. The final one that I talk about, I've learnt not to do this. I did this quite a bit, and occasionally I'm tempted to do that, and that is to have a little bit of fun. So my classic one that I used to, if someone came at me and I knew that they were just being a troll, I will respond. So they say, oh, you talk funny, you've got a lisp, you sound weird, you look weird. What do you know about anything? Blah. Something like that. Usually much more horrible. My response for a long time was, hey, you seem really nice. We should totally hang out. Look, is it funny? A little bit, kind of, maybe. Does it ever help? No. Doesn't. It's kind of in between. It's that passive aggressive. It's in between the hey, you okay, and the yeah, you suck as well. But occasionally I have actually gone down the respond with kindness way as well. So more often than not, if I'm going to go that direction now, I'll stop and go, am I lowering myself? Am I lowering my standards? Am I doing this just to try and be funny, or am I actually legitimately trying to help this person? And the other thing is, especially online, for me, for what it's worth, I'm a bit of a role model. I don't like to even think about that, but I do feel an obligation that when I'm responding to someone's comments, people are actually watching how I respond to those comments. So especially in a public group moderation situation, people will actually judge me based on the way I respond to others. So if I actually try and be a smart ass, a smart aleck all the time, that could actually reflect negatively upon me because people will think, oh, maybe John's is just as bad as these trolls that are trying to make this group bad. Maybe he needs to change the way he acts as well. Yeah, probably. So these days, I think in terms of if I saw someone respond that way, how would it make what would the perception of them be? And again, not that I have to worry about or you have to worry about what other people think and the way you act and behave, but it's kind of just made me think, hey, if you can't act with kindness, maybe just take your own advice and ignore them, ban them, remove them. They don't need to be there. As I always say, Studio Live today is not a democracy; it's a petocracy. So if you say something that I think, and again, this isn't, I know I will get at least a few comments from folks, maybe trolls, but maybe just kind folks that think that freedom of speech and 100% freedom to say exactly what you think and feel all the time is okay. I happen to disagree with that, and I find that that causes more hurt to more people than it does benefit. And if something is more hurtful than it is beneficial, in my opinion, we need to change the way that that's done. So if you're a pure freedom of speech person that thinks there should be no consequences and everyone should be able to say whatever they want to whomever they want in any way they like at all times, you're probably not going to have a lot of fun around these communities. There are communities for you. You'll find them. It'll be fine. But feel free to let me know. Am I way off the mark? Am I completely out of line here? You let me know. These are my views, and that's the good thing. The beauty part is that we don't have to be the same. And there's places. This is the cool thing. Because of the internet, because we're online, there's places for everyone. Your places may be very different to my places. Not to say you should live in a little echo chamber bubble and never venture out, but by the same token, if there's people that are not adding value to you and your life and your world, maybe you don't need to hang out with them quite as much. Just saying. That is going to do it. I know that was a bit of a long rant, but hopefully you've grabbed a nugget. This is all I really ask with these sort of shows is you're not going to agree with everything I say. You're not going to have experienced everything that I have, or all of this won't relate to you. But if you had an aha moment, maybe you'd never thought about the sunk cost bias concept, and now you're like, oh yeah, I do see those dudes that are like, and it's usually dudes. I do see those people that tell me, oh, I've got 23 years of recording experience, and I do listen to what they have to say maybe a little too much. So maybe now you'll take that with a little grain or shaker of salt. So yeah, if you've grabbed something out of this, then great. If not, let me know. I'm open to feedback. I'm open to all constructive comments and feedback. So if you're watching the video version, drop those in the comments below. If you're listening on the audio version, feel free to reach out to me. All the ways you can interact with me and the community and join some of the cool communities I was chatting about in this podcast. They're all over at studiolivetoday.com. So as we say at the end of each and every show, please be kind to yourself. Please be kind to others. Don't be a troll. And please keep creating. And I'll see you next time on the Studio Live Today podcast.